Okay, this is Frank Patti, and this is new conservative voice, and the guy in the other picture over there.
George the Aiton, where Frank and I are making wisdom great again, and there's no Operation Mockingbird here.
And we finally got our flag flying and the national anthem, and we're going to put it on right now. Okay, it's back. These things are slipping off my head.
Well, if
and
your head wasn't such a pointy object, then it wouldn't slip off of it.
Well, I'm going to gore you with it next time. Actually, that's my favorite song. I love it. I can never hear it too much. I think it's great. Let me make the announcements I usually make on it too. Number one, Nova is going to have Bill Connery. He was just elected to District 72. He's taking Tommy Gregory's seat, and he's going to be at Nova tonight, as a matter of fact. And if you've got time, it's at the Venice Community Center. You can look it up online, the address and all. Come. It'd be nice to have you down there, and you can hear a good speech for someone who just got elected on. Okay, now I'm going to go into the things we endorse. Okay. Number one, we need poll workers. I know we just went through a whole bunch of it. We need the poll workers for the next election. It's going to be like crash. And we need people who can handle themselves, like dealing with other people. You'll go to classes for it. You get paid for it. Okay. So if you can do that, you can go down to the Anderson Building in Venice, the Terrace Building in Sarasota, Biscayne Boulevard for Northport, or online for sarasotavotes.gov. We really do need you. We need people. You want to have a fair election. You want to have a really good election. You want to see the lines move. We kept them moving during the whole early vote. Believe me, we didn't have anybody waiting more than I think 1 minute. We were monitoring that to make sure that was not. So, Tunnels to Towers. Okay, it's a great organization. It's building apartments for veterans, get them off the street, get them a home, get them the help that they need, and it's building homes for the families of these veterans and firefighters, and policemen. They deserve it. They protected us. They've given their life, and in a lot of cases, it's the family. They've already been killed in action. So Tunnels to Towers is a good organization. You can get it online. Okay. The next one I always say is SELAH, SELAH. Freedom Fights Human Trafficking. Look, it's a horrible thing, the human trafficking. It really, really is. Uh, but this organization helps those women to get on their feet, gets them the psychological help and physical help that they need to rehabilitate themselves and go into the world again. It's not easy, but they do a good job. Go to www.selah, SELAH, freedom.com. It is a great organization, and the one thing I can tell you is it's worthwhile. Okay, one of my favorites, Our Mother's House. They help the women who decide to have their baby instead of aborting it out. Okay, abortion should only be done where the mother's life is in danger, where it's rape or incest. Those are exceptions. The rest of the way, you don't kill the baby because you made a mistake. You don't kill the baby because it's not the right time for it. This is part of your body. This is, I think, a terrible thing to do. However, this organization helps those women. For 2 years, they take them in, they feed them, they help them with the baby, they get them jobs or back to school to get an education. They do wonderful work. They're part of the Catholic Charities. And what you can do, send it. You can look them up online for and Post Office Box 2240, Venice, Florida 34284. If you can do that, that would be extremely wonderful. I mean, like my wife and I always contribute to. Same with Tunnels to Towers. These are things we contribute to that we look up and we know that they're good organizations. And the other thing, generally, we talk about adopting a pet, especially if you're elderly. It gives you a companion. It's a wonderful thing. My dog, Bella, is a pleasure, and she doesn't like George. So, yeah, I told the dog it was all right to bite him if he comes through the door.
Smart dog.
Yeah, one little bite won't kill you, George. Take off some weight on you. That's so. No, really, you should think about that if you can do it. And also for the elderly, if your eyes are bothering you, go to an optometrist, get your eyes checked. I had the surgery on them, and it was nothing. Believe me, it was nothing. And that's the cataract surgery. And now I see a lot better at a distance. I don't know, with the world today, it may not be a great idea. And you can get that. Your hearing aids. You can go down to the audiologist. Yeah, George go down to the audiologist and get his ears checked. Do not let yourself get isolated. Okay? If your hearing goes, it's terrible. I had an aunt like that, and the mentally went off mentally from that because she was isolated from everything. And go to your doctor for your checkup when you're supposed to. And I get the vaccine for antivirus vaccine each year. I've been doing it for years, and I find it works pretty well. I haven't gotten the virus since then. Now I open my big mouth, I'll probably get it. Okay, but that's on our listings that we've got to do. So if you can, come down to Nova, because I think you'll enjoy it. They're a great bunch of people. Nova is a Republican club. So if you can come down on that. George, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I need to go on a rant here. I am really getting frustrated. I'm about ready to hit my two pet peeves here. Number one is let's see what's at stake for our country right now. Number one, we have a socialist as a presidential candidate. Number two, we have a VP that praises the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. He praises them. He stood by and allowed Minneapolis to burn. During COVID, he sent police officers through the streets of Minneapolis telling everyone to get inside. And if he did not, they got shot with paintballs. And I'm kind of getting frustrated here, and I'm going to get into my real frustration here shortly. But during the Bush era, we also had someone who, he got beat up a lot. And we said, boy, I wish we had a fighter. Now we do. And the only thing we're talking about now is how our candidate, Donald Trump, is being mean and doing everything wrong, or is insensitive, and he's going to lose if he doesn't do that. So let's not fall into the information psychology operations that Harris is a superior candidate than Donald Trump. It's not. And all that is a gambit to get us to back off of our values. We got to stand with our values. Otherwise, we are going to lose. I'm tired of this falling into the Democrat, playbook of we need to back off. We need to do this. We need to do that. And even on our side, we have people that are down talking our presidential candidate, Donald Trump. We're playing right into the hands of the political left. And we would never do that for our favorite sports team. I mean, we have our favorite sports team. We'd never badmouth them all the time. Why are we doing it for a presidential candidate? We have a superior candidate in Donald Trump. Let's talk about that. And name me one product. Name me one product that you can sell by badmouthing it all the time. And then some would say, well, we're going to lose the women vote and all this other stuff. Let's bring up the point that Biden in Afghanistan, under the Biden-Harris administration, Taliban takes over and 1.4 Afghan women are banned from education. And now let's look at what the left is doing to get rid of Trump via lawfare. We in Florida could stop this lawfare in 5 days if we had people that had the courage to do it. We could end this frivolous lawsuit tomorrow by standing up and saying, we in the state of Florida are no longer going to do any business with any company based in New York. This stuff would end tomorrow. I've seen over the last 30 years, the Republican Party makes a big, we're strong, we're this, we're that. No, not anymore. I mean, I'm really frustrated with this kind of behavior. I see it time and time and time again, and I'm really frustrated with it. And it's time the Republican Party stands up and fights instead of acting like a bunch of wusses in this campaign. We're the strong ones. They're the weak ones. And I'm tired of the bad mouthing of the Donald Trump by saying, if we doesn't do this, we're going to lose this vote. We're not. And I'm sitting there looking at some other stuff here. Even in a Fox poll, which has Trump up by 1, he's getting 20%, 26% of the black vote. I mean, that's unheard of. And 52% of the Hispanic vote. That's huge. So to add to this, we're going to bring on our local expert here, Jamie Miller. And Jamie, welcome to the show. Let me get you over here. There you are. Hey, Jamie, how you doing? Welcome.
Hi, Jamie.
Give us your thoughts on our primary here we had in Florida and going forward in our national election.
Well, yeah, there's some good things that happened in Florida. At the top of the ticket, Senator Rick Scott was able to get more than 80% in a Republican primary, which is just outstanding. To put that in perspective, his Democrat opponent, who didn't have much of an opponent either, only scored 65%. So there's a lot of reasons for Floridians to feel confident about the general election here in Florida, especially going for Donald Trump and Rick Scott. One thing is the Democrat state party chairwoman, Nikki Freed, the former agriculture pot commissioner. She made a horrible strategic mistake in June when she decided to file Democrat candidates. And even if you only define unqualified as not living in your district, there are dozens she filed who are unqualified. People who live outside the district, outside that county, outside that region, who they filed for these 140 state legislative offices. And so when it comes down to Florida, as you've heard me say before, that it has a lot to do with budgeting. There's no business school that teaches a business model where you start at zero, you raise tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, you end at zero, and you are successful. But that is a political campaign. So she effectively required Republican incumbents to inject another $150 million into Republican turnout in the state in Florida. So even if Kamala Harris was going to get close in Florida, she doesn't have a chance. So every dollar she spends here in Florida is one wasted that she can't spend in Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Georgia, in those Rust Belt states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. A couple of things that your listeners might want to look at is I think Donald Trump has a real opportunity in Michigan, where there's an open U.S. Senate seat that is a swing seat, and then also a toss-up by most by the Cook political report, and there's also 2 U.S. House seats in Michigan that are categorized a toss-up that were Democratic, held by Democrats. So if Donald Trump can get on board with those 3 candidates and they can have a group victory, look for Michigan, for Trump to do much better in Michigan than the 3 to 5 point lead that Kamala Harris currently has there. The other place is New Hampshire. New Hampshire has a governor's race this year, and their primary isn't until September 8th. So New Hampshire traditionally trends blue, but former U.S. Senator, Republican U.S. Senator Aiton is the likely gubernatorial candidate. And so there could be an opportunity there. So if there's a lot to look forward to. There's, here in Florida, up and down the ticket, it was a good night. There's not a whole lot of daylight. There were Republican challengers against U.S. House members, Republican incumbents. They all lost significantly. Here in our backyard, there was a challenge to Congressman Vern Buchanan. He had a significant, more than 20-point victory, and will go on to win the general election in November as well. So I touched a lot of bases there. I don't know that I touched all the ones that you wanted me to, but
you're doing fine.
It's a pretty, of course, the Democrat National Convention is this week, and I don't know that they are saying anything there that is, while it's inspiring hardcore Democrats, I don't think it's inspiring hardworking Americans. And and that, there's a lot going on that, just today, this morning, the Labor Bureau put out an adjustment for the last 12 months employment numbers, saying that the administration, they always adjust these numbers, that they had overestimated the jobs created in the last year by 885,000 jobs over the last year that they didn't recognize were not created, non-farm jobs. Another report just yesterday, we have 320,000 undocumented children who the Biden administration have just lost. They've lost without, they came into the country undocumented and without adults. So these children are now, and the Department of Labor goes on to speculate that they're either being trafficked, they're being exploited, or they're slaves. And
Jamie, they didn't lose them. They're just misplaced for a short time.
Yeah. So
it's
if you
like
go ahead. If you look at 320,000 people, the 60th largest city in the United States is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has 300,000 people. So we're talking about almost 10% larger, a population larger than Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So, when Democrats say that there are 4 children, I'd like to know which ones they're for, because they can't even keep track of the ones they're responsible for. Exactly. And so it's a horrible, there's one issue after another of the failed Biden-Harris administration. And, this election should become about those issues very shortly following the Democrat National Convention. So
I watched about 30 seconds of the Democrat convention, and it kind of reminded me of the bar scene in Star Wars.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Basically, you know, the thing someone said that they interviewed somebody on the street, and you would think, well, it's a matter of economics. They don't really understand it. But this guy said the same thing. He said they had all these jobs. They're not new. These were jobs that people left during the pandemic and were going back to, and other places that just got up on their feet again and people are going back to. So their numbers don't gel. I mean, they're trying to say these are new jobs. They're not a lot of them.
Yeah, Frank, as you know, part of my background is in economic development. So I have a lot of friends who I follow and listen to and read who are nonpartisan economists. You know, people like Jerry Parrish, who's the economist for the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, which is one of the biggest think tanks in Georgia. And any of those economists will tell you that that to have a fair comparison, you have to go from February of 2020, not January of 2021,
right,
when you look at these jobs numbers. And when you go from February 2020, you see that the Biden-Harris administration have created no new jobs, none. Right. And so the only jobs they're taking credit for are the ones that were lost during COVID, to your point, Frank. And, you know, people are sick of hearing about excuses from COVID, and they're sick of, you know, not being able to make ends meet or having a third job, you know, and we live in a community where it's really disheartening, you know, to go to Starbucks and see the number of senior citizens who now have had to go back to work. And that's happening throughout the country. Of course, it's pronounced here in Sarasota County with our large number of seniors, but there's a disproportionate amount of people who have retired and have now had to go back and take part-time work just to try to make ends meet.
Also the inflation. Stop doing it month to month. You go back to 2020 when it was 1.4, and then it zoomed up to 9. I mean, when you try to do month to month, it doesn't tell you the whole picture.
And there's an economic theory called the ROM method that if you look at it, I don't want to get too complicated, but it has to do with the amount of jobs. And even before this adjustment of 885,000 jobs that the federal government claimed they created over the last year that they did not, about the time Kamala Harris got in the race, I think it was about the report that came out about July 27th, that if you use the ROM method, that's the day that the U.S. economy actually entered a recession. And of course, a recession is defined by 2 quarters of negative economic activity.
Yes.
So oddly enough, you know, the recession that we're currently in will not be reported until after the election. But using the ROM method, we're currently in a recession, and those folks, you know, people who like myself and like you all are either on fixed incomes or you know, I don't want to say working paycheck to paycheck, but you know, you have a certain amount of money, and you see more and more of that money going to expenses like electricity and food and all the other things that take your gas, the things that you need to live. And Democrats just don't simply seem to care. They just are not in touch with reality when it comes to the economy. Kamala Harris to this day does not have any plans on her website about what she is going to do for the economy or for international policy or for anything else, really. She has a lot of feel-good bumper strip slogans, like our good friend Vivek Ramaswamy. I was like, he had a lot of good ones too, but hers are devastating to the United States, to our economy, to our position in the world. And as we turn the page on Labor Day and after the DNC, I think, you know, in my Substack at reasonablearguments.com, I wrote, there's 3 phases of Kamala Harris. They are excitement that, you know, she's in the race. There's relief that she's not Joe Biden, and regret that they're stuck with Kamala Harris. And so I think that is what we were going to see this fall.
Well, it was interesting to me when somebody asked her about the inflation. She is, well, we're going to do a child tax credit so they can get $5,000 each family, and that's going to take care of the inflation. I'm going like,
You're going to push the inflation up.
Whatever she's smoking, I want some of that stuff.
Well, and if you look at basic economic development principles, just her one theory on giving first-time home buyers $25,000 will likely increase the value of first-time homes by about $120,000.
That's right.
Because all it's going to do is provide people with an extra down payment for that extra $120K. And if you stretch that out into a monthly payment, you're going to have to, that's going to be an extra $600 a month, roughly at 7% interest, which is, due to their inflationary pressures. You're going to stretch that out. When you stretch that 600 out, it works out to right at $2,200 per month, or $2,000 per month, using, like, these are long established economic development principles where, to not be house poor, you only spend 30% of your gross income on housing. So if it's going to increase the price of a house by $600 a month, every new home buyer is going to have to make an additional $2,000 a month to cover that additional expense, which is $24,000 a year. So she's not talking about wage creation. She's talking about price controls. She's talking about, she talks about, oh, this is what we're going to do. And we know with price controls that all that does is increase black market goods and reduces the amount of goods that are available. And so through price controls. So every economic policy she's come up with has economists, nonpartisan economists, throwing their hands in the air, thinking, what are we going to do as an American economy if this woman gets elected?
She said directly she wanted wage price controls. There has to be a vacuum between her ears. It has been tried in Europe, and everywhere that was tried, it didn't work. Under the Nixon administration, it was tried, and he stopped it damn fast because it wasn't working. It's the formula for destruction. And she has no idea what she's talking about. You ask her about the real price wage, and she doesn't know. She doesn't know what you're talking about. She doesn't know the relationship of what you're buying to what you're earning, what you're spending to what you're earning. What's your real price wage? What is your real wage after that? I mean, this is economics. I know economics. They don't. The Democrats were always terrible on economics, but great on promises.
Well, that's and not even promises that they're likely to keep or likely to be effective if they're capable of keeping them. And that's, I think, the big issue here is even the things that people like the sound of, these are not things that can ever be implemented in an effective way. They could implement them, but if they get implemented, they're going to be counterproductive.
Oh, definitely. And the gasoline still is going up and down and up and down. He's drawing on the National Reserve, the military reserve. It's down to the floor almost. We don't have, if war started, we don't have that. And he's lowering the prices by doing that so they can get elected. But you can't count on that forever. I mean, this is just stupid. Now they're pumping more oil. Everything they're saying, well, we're doing it now. And the question is, why didn't you do it before? Why didn't you close the border before? You were saying, I did it by, his own signing for the bill. Well, why didn't he do it before? I mean, now you're right. She's running. And, Biden is so stupid. They stabbed him in the back. They kicked him out the door. And the guy's still bowing to them. I can't get over it. And we still got Obama running the show.
I've not seen anyone led to the guillotine and thanked his executors more than Joe Biden did Monday night. So it was really kind of sad to watch. And the hypocrisy that it was on display with everyone thanking him and praising him and, handing the American people a failed economy, a failed international policy, and a failed energy policy. it's unfortunate that that the Democrats wallow in their victory of America's demise, and it's needs to stop, and it needs to stop on November 5th by voting for Donald Trump.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I kind of want to get into a little bit of some of the numbers, but I'm just going to tell you a little secret, something that happened yesterday when I was at poll watching. Our tent was right next to the Democrats' tent, and I'm kind of helping them set up and let them use tape and stuff like that, and so one of the guys I had a really good rapport with, and another guy was pretty nasty to me because I was a Republican. And then a couple other women came in and they said, I want to know where you get this information from about one of our candidates. And I go, well, I think it's kind of common knowledge. And she goes, why would you vote for someone that grabbed someone in the private area like Donald Trump did? And I go, that's the best you've got. I said, every Democrat city is on fire right now. And the only response that you have is something that I believe has been debunked years ago. I don't know if it's been debunked, but it actually happened many, many, many years ago. And I said, that's the best you've got. I said, how about what Biden did with, getting funds from foreign people to do business for him? I said, let's talk about that. And let's talk about every Democrat city that's on fire right now. That's the difference between Donald Trump and your candidate there. So, but I just kind of want to get in a little bit about some of these polls. Now you were saying that Donald Trump is behind. Is that because of the bump in the because the convention is going on?
You just went low, George. You just went low. Your voice went very low.
Oh, how about now?
No, still low. Can you hear him on that?
I can hear him fine.
Oh, okay.
And maybe it's my stuff.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to.
So if we're talking about the polls, there's certainly when it was Joe Biden, there was Trump was leading in the national polls, right? Which we all know don't necessarily mean much, but they can track. I think through national polls, you can track national trends, right? How people are thinking about the race. And certainly when Harris got into the race, it became much more competitive. I wrote him again in my Substack, Reasonable Arguments, that when the second she got into the race, she had probably twice as many paths to victory than Joe Biden. And at that time, Donald Trump had about 3 or 4 times as many paths to victory as Harris. Now I think Harris and Trump probably have a similar number of paths, right? Can Trump still put Virginia in play? Possibly. Can he still put Minnesota in play, which was looking like it was going to go in play? Probably not. Can Harris put Georgia in play? Probably not without a U.S. Senate candidate at the top of the ticket. So, but there's a governor's race in North Carolina. So even though a Democrat governor won in both 2016 and in 2020, Trump still carried North Carolina. So you'd have to think North Carolina's probably a bridge too far for Harris, which leaves her with her offensive opportunities being Arizona and Nevada, with a caveat that Ohio is a bellwether state when you start looking at national trends. Now, Trump is still winning in Ohio, but there's a very popular Democrat incumbent U.S. senator who is also running for re-election. And if that race either becomes close or the Republican is capable of winning it, Ohio certainly goes to Trump. But if that U.S. Senate candidate provides Kamala Harris what I like to call reverse coattails, Ohio could be a trouble spot for Trump the way Michigan could be a trouble spot for Harris. So if I was running the Trump team, I would make sure that I shored up some resources to protect Ohio just in case, and probably make sure that U.S. Senate candidate is very well financed. So, but right now, you look at external things. There's also a Democrat U.S. Senate incumbent in Nevada. So you would have to think for Trump to win, that the challenger for U.S. Senate must also either get very close or win themselves. The same thing in Wisconsin. So a lot of the things that were in Trump's favor in 2016, mostly no U.S. Senate candidate in Michigan, no U.S. Senate race in Michigan in 2016, and Republican incumbent U.S. senators running in both Michigan and Wisconsin, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, were the two states that had Republican incumbents, and then Trump ended up sweeping through all three. Those advantages that existed for Trump in 2016 did not exist in 2020 and do not exist in 2024. So I only say all that to say that if the Trump team was going to run the same campaign they ran in 2016, which they looked like they ran in 2020, they're going to be as successful as they were in 2020, which, we can argue all day whether he won or lost or whether, but the truth of the matter is he ended up on the tail end of some very close elections. And if he runs this race the same way he ran 2016, he's going to end up with 4 or 5 states that are very close, that are going to end up being coin flips.
Yeah.
And they don't need, I don't think they need to be, but that's just, and that's not me being critical of Trump or being anti-Trump. It's just the lay of the land.
What do you think about this thing with Kennedy? They're talking very seriously about him dropping out of the race and telling his people to go over to Trump. That they said that Kennedy was going to hurt Trump more than he was going to hurt the Kamala.
Yeah. That's changed a lot once Harris got in the race. When it was Trump versus Biden, Kennedy seemed to be taking a slightly higher percentage, and it was a little bit weird, from the front runner. So let's say, for instance, you're in California. Kennedy seemed to be taking a little bit more from Biden in California than he was taking from Trump. But in Florida, where Trump was leading big, Kennedy took a little bit more from Trump than he did Biden. So that's kind of changed. And Kennedy was polling at about 8%. So now Kennedy's fallen back to 3% or something like that in national polls, and really has kind of become insignificant. I doubt that him being in or out of the race, that sort of regressed towards the mean, which, is kind of a polling term we use to say back to normal. And Kennedy certainly has done that. I don't know that there's a significant number of more voters who vote for Trump over versus Harris by Kennedy getting out of the race. I think the majority of his votes go to another third party candidate because they're just the people who are upset with both.
Well, I was listening to Karl Rove before, and Karl was warning basically about polls. He said, be very careful with the polls. He said, you don't know, more or less was saying you don't know what's coming from where, and that's always been what I said. You have to know where they took it, who they took it from, what was the breakdown, how did they interpret it, how did they add it? The whole thing has to be in there, and you're never going to get that.
Well, and that's a good example. Last week a poll came out that USA Today and our very own Zach Anderson from the Sarasota Herald Tribune was wrote about that. Harris was within 5 points of Trump, but when you dug down into it, they probably oversampled Democrats by 2 to 3 points, and that's not. Everyone knows 2 to 3 points is within the margin of error, and
right.
So. 2 other polls came out last week as well, one by AIF, one by one of the colleges, and one had Trump up 8 and the other one had Trump up 9, which would make perfect sense if the USA Today, now, to be fair to USA Today, it's not a perfect science, and USA Today claims that, we believe that there's going to be a 2% that 2% is justified because medical marijuana or legal marijuana, recreational marijuana, and abortion is on the ballot. So they do have a legitimate reason to fudge that number, that 2%, to try to get there and try to get it as close as possible. I don't think that either one of those measures increases turnout for Democrats 2% more than it encourages turnout for Republicans. I think both those amendments are probably a wash as far as turnout. Maybe a 0.5% for Democrats, or maybe a percentage for Democrats. But like I said, between Rick Scott and Nikki Fried's mistake, there's a pretty good firewall in Florida for Donald Trump.
Yeah. I think Zach Anderson is not one of, I know him, and I debated him on TV, and his knowledge I could put in a thimble about this size. He doesn't report the actual facts. One thing for Scott, one time, there was a rally and we were in the restaurant. They were banging on the windows. And he reported that we only had about 25 people. They had about 3 times that amount. And he always did that, cut down on the Republicans for anything that goes. So, Zach, I take Zach with a pound of salt, not a grain.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I wasn't trying to make this a referendum on Zach, but he certainly wrote about it, and I think he reported those facts correctly about the poll. But I think the poll in and of itself was, and that's a poll that skewed a little bit in the Democrats' favor, not a lot. And the closest Kamala Harris could get was 5 points. And the other thing people don't really realize is that Florida has 10 media markets, 10. You look at Nevada or New Hampshire, you have 1 or 2 or maybe 3. And out of those 10 media markets, 3 are in the top 20 most expensive, and 6 are in the top 56 most expensive media markets in the United States. So for a statewide candidate like Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, in a vacuum, she would have to spend $15 million per point more than Donald Trump. So Florida is really fool's gold for Kamala Harris. I hope she spends the $150 to $250 million that she feels like she needs to win, because if she spends 250, my guess is Donald Trump can spend 40 or 50 and still win by 3 to 5 points.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that is an absolute mystery to me is how you can take somebody like Harris, who was even disliked in the primary against Joe Biden, getting 3% of the delegates, and now put her at the top of the ticket and getting all these wonderful accolades from the media. I just saw a media report from Media Matters that she's getting over 80% positive, where Donald Trump is getting over 80% negative. And her likability is almost zero. I mean, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Her likability is zero. I cannot understand, without the aid of the media, how her numbers can be even close to this real numbers, as far as likability, as far as electability, and the whole 9 yards. I just don't understand that.
So I can tell you one thing. Basically, you've got the women vote on the abortion, and this is the first woman for president, and of color. What we're doing is the identity voting. A lot of them are identity voting, saying, I don't care who she is, she'll be in the first woman, and the first woman of color. This is a way to destroy a country, by identity voting, not by.
We did this once before with Obama. Obama was the first block, and he set the stage for. So I think American people are going nah, let's just not do it right now.
Yeah, don't forget the other. And I'll just go back to strategy for a standpoint versus messaging, but their strategy all along for this election cycle was to win a sprint. That's why they decided to have their convention so late in the cycle, even though they knew that was going to cause problems in Ohio. Even though Ohio fixed their problems, they still shoved through this nomination of Harris via Zoom call a couple of weeks ago, making the convention meaningless. So their goal always was just to ride the convention into Labor Day and then try to coast to Election Day to victory. And certainly someone within the Democratic Party, and no one speaks about this, but someone got convinced Joe Biden to completely go against the strategy that they had set up for a year or more. It takes 12, 18 months to set up the date and place of a convention. So for 18 months, the Democrat strategy has been, hey, we're going to wait until the weekend before Labor Day, have our convention, or the week and a half before Labor Day, have our convention and try to coast, get as high as we can, get that bounce as high as we can out of the convention and coast to victory. But somehow someone convinced Joe Biden to have a debate in June. So who really convinced him to do that? And who really was the Brutus to Joe Biden's Caesar who stabbed him in the back? And of course, we know it was Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries, all of whom stood up Monday night and hypocritically told Joe Biden to his face and the nation to our face what a great job Joe Biden had done, and that he was now the savior of America and freedom. And while they were actively throwing him overboard.
Yeah. I think that was the biggest stab in the back he, in fact, could have had. And he's not smart enough to know that he was stabbed, I think. I think Joe Biden has never been that bright. Let's face it. As a senator, he went on the wrong side of everything. He didn't even want to go at the Osama bin Laden. He wanted to let it go. And just look at Afghanistan. I mean, it was a debacle the size of unbelievability. And they keep trying to bury that, And
he was a marginal U.S. senator at best. He's been a horrible, horrible president at best. And his legacy is this huge inflation that he brought, the recession that we're currently feeling, prices that are out of control, and a world that is less safe. I mean, that is Joe Biden's legacy, and he will not be the one who is able to fix it. And certainly his protege and Obama's protege in Vice President Harris will not be able to fix it either.
I agree.
Yeah. I learned something, because the question I asked before was, I don't understand how someone with this much dislikability is polling so high. And I learned something, and maybe you can address this. It's called response bias. Can you kind of give me a quick 30,000 foot
response
definition?
Bias is simply I don't buy into that much, but response bias is when people respond to polling in a way that they feel like they are expected to answer. So, for instance, I can buy into response bias about Trump's negative numbers, because people don't want to tell a stranger on the phone, or even an internet poll where people know their IP address or anything like that, that they've said something positive about Donald Trump. So I can buy into that. I don't know that I buy into the response bias about the enthusiasm and excitement around Vice President Harris's nomination. I do think that excitement is real. I don't know that it's long lasting. I think we're in the midst of trying to see, and her speech tomorrow night will go a long way into determining whether she carries a large amount of momentum out of the Democrat National Convention or no momentum at all. And certainly, I will say that, Donald Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention slowed down the momentum of his presidential race. Now, he had his speech 93 minutes Thursday night, and then on Monday, the following Sunday, Biden gets out of the race, and by Tuesday, Harris is the nominee. So there were a lot of things that happened to slow down the momentum of Donald Trump's campaign. But for the most part, you know, and you guys have heard me say this before, for the most part, Donald Trump won in 2016 with roughly 48% of the vote. And he lost in 2020 with roughly 48% of the vote. And if you ask me today where he's trending to get on election night, it's about 48% of the vote. You know, so if we're going to be critical of Donald Trump, it is that he is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. He has not expanded the electorate during his presidency. He's not expanding the electorate now. And by that, I mean, in 2016, he registered a whole lot of new voters and was able to beat an unpopular Hillary Clinton. I do think there's going to be some unpopular, you know, I think people like the idea of Kamala Harris. They don't like I think when they realize the reality, you'll see this momentum slow. Does it slow fast enough? And is the momentum slowing strong enough that she doesn't win the election? I don't know. I mean, today, Donald Trump, you know, if we went into election day today, it would be a coin flip in these 7 states. And I don't know who would win all 7 of those states. And I don't know who would win the Electoral College. So, but that is after a full 4 weeks of Harris having the media all to herself and Trump not expanding the electorate. I have been, the one thing I would suggest, and I write again in my blog, that, you know, Donald Trump should go away from these expensive rallies. I know he loves them and they look great on TV, but you're preaching to the choir. And
exactly.
No swing voters are turning on the television to watch a Trump rally. They've seen, if they've wanted to see one, they've seen one in the last 7 years, and they've seen enough of them. And so, you know, to spend a couple $100,000 per rally or more, by the time you include security and travel and all these things, you know, he would be doing himself a service if he put that money into direct voter contact to swing voters. And, you know, that's, to me, that's the one thing I would like to, you know, I hope that the campaign is talking about behind the scenes is saving money on rallies and doing things. You know, one thing I suggested to Newt Gingrich when I was his campaign advisor in Florida for his presidential race was, you know, instead of talking to Katie Couric at the time on Good Morning America, why don't you come to Tampa and talk to one of our local reporters? Why don't you come to Orlando and talk to a local trusted reporter? Give them an interview of their lifetime and let that local trusted reporter, you know, take your message to the people, the local viewers who, you know, and talk about local issues, you know. So if Donald Trump, you know, Donald Trump, I think at this point, the campaign's not about him as much as he wants it to be about him. It's going to be either about Kamala Harris and her ability to fire up the base, her base, or her failures as vice president. And so he is, you know, if Donald Trump wants to make it about himself, he should do it a little bit more cagey, if you will, you know, and do it a little bit more behind the scenes and in local pockets and swing states, reaching out to swing voters, and because those are the folks who are going to determine the election.
Yeah, JB, we got like 30 seconds left here, and I have an announcement to make. I just kind of want to make it. First of all, I want to thank you for joining us on the New Conservative Voice, and the announcements are thus: if you want to get this in recorded view, you go on X, and X, the handle is the THENCV for the New Conservative Voice. So X is the THENCV. On True Social and Rumble, it's just TNCV. So if you want to watch this, watch Jamie, Frank, and my ugly mug go on social media and watch it. And I want to thank you, Jamie, for hanging out with us for an hour. And hang on, and we're going to sign off here shortly. But God bless you. God bless America. And hang on, Jamie, after we're done recording.
Okay.